All right, and we're back. It's COMP125. It's client-side web development here at Centennial College. It's the summer 2016 semester. It's week 4, part 4 of our broadcast, and we're recording at the same time. We just talked about how to do some output to the console. That's what we're doing with us with this thing. And again, I'm trying to prepare you for next week so you can work on assignment 2 when your assignment 1 is done, right? Some of you may be smart enough to make it all one. That's fine too. As long as I have 2 separate submissions, I'm good. We talked about something called a method of the event. Again, the event that's occurring here, called prevent default. Prevent default, right? And this prevent default stops the default behavior of an item on your web page. Okay, here's a problem though. We got a problem, right? What if I go to my other pages? So I'm on my contact form and refresh it, and now I'm going to go to my home page. Uh-oh. Look what's going on here. I got an error that stops my page from working. What is this error? And I did it on purpose, and it was going to happen, right? So here's my page. It says, type error, cannot read add event listener of null. Well, what the hell is it talking about? Well, it says app.js line 25. If I click on this thing, it'll point down to the submit button or the send button. Hold on, does my home have a send button? No. Because my home doesn't have a send button, it's going to create an error because I'm trying to do add event listener. Add event listener, sure, this part works, right? This piece will work all the time. Send button document.getElementById, it'd just be null or undefined, right? But this part, when I actually try and add an event listener, I'm creating a separate process, right? It's asynchronous. That's running all at the same time. That means that all of your pages right now will have an error, right? Like this. If I go to projects, right, then I'm going to have an error. If I go to about me, I'm going to have an error. But on contacts, everything is good because I have a send button and a cancel button and a form, right? How do I fix it? There's a couple of ways to do this, right? And by the way, we're talking about debugging. So if you were going to step it through, before we've done console logs, if you can't find your error or whatever, you want to do a console log, I can click inspect on Chrome or even on Firefox. If I go to sources, take a look here. What I could do is I know my problem is around my send button, right? I could create a breakpoint here inside the browser, actually, right? So I just click inside the margin here in the gutter, and I create a breakpoint around this variable, send button. All right, now that I've created my variable, my send button, I could refresh my page, right? And my send button, my debugging is, my actual rendering of my page is paused, right? And I can step through it all. Take a look at the right here. It tells me local variables. For example, contact form at this stage, when my page first loads, is undefined. I haven't got anything for my contact form yet because it hasn't loaded yet and because of the way that I've created this thing. So at this stage, because it hasn't gotten to my contact form or my first name, right? Contact form is undefined and first name is also undefined, right? It tells you the values here. This is another great way of debugging your code. If you want to find the values, it's right here in Chrome, right? It's beautiful. All right, let's take a look, and you can see where the breakpoint is, right? You can have multiple breakpoints. Let's keep stepping. Now, there's different ways here. On the controls inside Chrome, I could step into the next function call. So I'm going to keep going. There's the next one. So I go to my send button at event listener, right? Now you can still see the values, the scope right now, what's happening. My local scope, contact form and first name are undefined, index is undefined. My paragraph elements, there's an array. I can actually click inside of them, and you can see that each one of my paragraphs is null. 0, 1, and 2, right? Because I don't have paragraphs inside my contact form, and that's why they're null. If I had paragraphs to link into, these would be different values. I'm going to show you this when I click into my other pages for a second, okay? Here's my paragraphs array, also null, with a length of 0. Here's my send button. I actually have a value for my send button. And so if I click into this, you can see that it is relating it into an actual element that's on the page. So I have my send button here, okay? I need to see this in order for me to make it work in every other page, my send button, okay? Otherwise, I can't do add event listener like I'm doing right here, right? Let me just put this back the way it is. So here's my send button click event. Notice that I've defined it, send button click. This is what I'm doing when I'm adding the event listener here. I'm adding this send button click event, and I actually have a defined event. Here's my event. The name that I'm using is send button click because it's a named function. That's my callback function right here, right? And then in my function, I can call this next function. Let's continue stepping through, right? Okay, cool. I've created my send button click function, and now you can see that things are starting to change. My values are starting to take on different elements. My show form input, right? Show form input is also a method that I've declared down here, way back down here. And you can see that it's been registered. Here's a question for you guys. How is it that even at this line 33, please pay attention because it's really important from a debugging perspective, guys and girls, right? How is it, here's my question, how is it that my show form input, which I defined down here, is defined up here? So I'm getting, right on line 33, I haven't defined my show form input. It's defined on line 46. How come in the browser it still has a value? You know the answer? I want you to think of this, and this is what happens with JavaScript that messes you up so you understand this very clearly. There's something going on called hoisting, right? So even though my JavaScript file is being read, what's happening is it's already gone through, the browser has already gone through and parsed my entire file and interpreted it, right? Because that's what it is, an interpreted language, right? So it's going to go through, and in the interpreter, the browser, it's not compiling, it's interpreting. So it's going to take any variable calls like this. Even a function call is a variable call in some ways. I'm creating a variable or a container called show form input. And it's defining this thing because it's hoisting it to the top. Even if I declare it on the bottom, I can still call something that's been declared later, right? Which can cause problems. That means that even though I've declared my function here on line 46, it's still available to me in line 22, right? So what's happening is it's taking this function as the browser is interpreting my JavaScript and putting it to the top. This is bad. If you think sometimes you want to do things in a particular order, JavaScript has its own order, right? Just FYI, it could cause weird effects in the future, right? Okay. So we've got our JavaScript, and by the way, we're writing it so far we've written our JavaScript in a very unorganized fashion. We're going to change that over the course of the next week or so. We're going to become more organized and more strict, right? But I want you to see what happens. Let's continue kicking through here. So I'm going to kick through the code. You can see that line by line, we get different values here. For example, my first name now has a value, right? And notice that it's first name inside my form with a class of form control, right? Notice here's my first name. And I can get all my values for my first name, whatever the value is, if I had such a thing. But it's defined now. First name is defined, right? Because I have a first name, right? And I keep going through it, and you can see that every line I step through, it's going to give me my values, right? Here's my paragraph, and it's going to keep kicking through again and again. It's going to go through the whole thing. And I can actually continue my operation by clicking this plus button or the play button. So there it is. So now I can see my whole form is rendered, right? Let's do the same thing, but let's click on the home button. Notice that right now I still got my little action here, but here's where I have a problem. At this stage, my contact form is undefined. Am I getting a console error? No, because it hasn't got to that yet. Remember, I'm using my debugger that's built into my tools to step through. So here's my local variables. This is a great way of checking your variables to, without doing a bunch of console logs, right, to see what's going on here, right? So I can see that my contact form is undefined. My first name right now is undefined. My index is undefined. I got a bunch of other stuff here. My paragraph elements has an array of 3. I've already done this piece. So should I be able to go through here and see what they are? Look. Because I have a paragraph, right? I have a paragraph element. Then my paragraph element itself I have a reference to it because it exists. So because it exists, I have a value for my paragraph. So my paragraph 1 does exist, and I've created a reference to it in this array, paragraph 1, right? Let's keep stepping through because where do I assign the paragraph data? Well, it's assigned somewhere else, right down here, right? We haven't got to that point yet. Let's keep clicking through. So I go to my send button event listener. Uh-oh, wait a minute. If I go through here, this is where it stops, right? Because it's kind of trying to figure it out. Send button is null. Send button is null. And because of this, it's kicking up it's going to kick up a console error in a second, right? Because send button doesn't exist. There is no send button on my form, on my page, right? Let's keep going. All right. Now we're in trouble. Now we're in trouble. Okay, so this is what happens. There is no send button on the form. Now, how do you clear breakpoints? If I go back to sources, I can uncheck this as an example. And if I rerun my page, if I refresh my page, so stop it, refresh, there is no more. I can, right now my breakpoint is clear. I can also erase my breakpoint if I go back to sources, right? And if I click on my app.js, I could erase my breakpoint by taking it away, by clicking in the gutter. I can click and unclick and take away my breakpoint. I can make as many breakpoints as I want. And by the way, if you've done any kind of debugging in another language like C#, this is very similar. But instead of debugging right inside your IDE, you're debugging here in the browser, right? So you're actually doing all your breakpoints. And again, guys and girls, a great way of debugging your code and trying to find out what the values are of everything else. And I know right now I can see that there's an error because there is no send button. So how do I fix it? We already did this one time. So I want to check to see if send button exists. If send button exists, then I'll do an add event listener, right? All this stuff I'll put inside of my my if statement, a conditional statement like this. If send button, right? So if send button exists, so check to see if send button exists. So check to see if send button exists. And then, do this. So I kind of move this into here, right? Now, if I was to do this, this is okay because my callback function won't be called. This is just a function. It doesn't trigger unless I click the button, right? So this would be okay. Now, it's still going to fail down here for this event listener. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one. If my form exists, then do this, right? So I can do the same thing. It's something like if contact form, if it exists, then do all this. Now, this is something that I'm doing that's a little weird. I'm actually creating an inline function inside of an if statement. That's totally cool. You can totally do that. And you can do one of these. I'm showing you this because you're going to need it, or else your code for assignment 2 will not work. All right, let's see if this works out and see if this fixes my problem. So here's my page. I refresh. Yay, everything's good, right? And now I don't have an error on any of my pages anymore, right? Because I'm checking to see if an element exists before I do something with that element, right? Okay, one more thing before we go for today. Documentation. I asked you to document your stuff. And I asked you for inline comments and all kinds of other stuff, right? Now, what I want is at the top of your page. So here's at the top of your page here. And it's not just my main JavaScript file. I want to put in some code, right? So something like, by the way, this is kind of interesting what you can do here, right? I want to add in some code. And I want to kind of put in some of the stuff that you require on your assignment. So if I go to assignment number 1, and let's talk about what you require for your assignment number 1. I got to show you what I'm looking for here, right? So if you look at assignment number 1 under your documentation, it says you need the file name, an author's name, the website name, and a file description at the very minimum, right? So file name and author's name. Well, what's the file name? My file name is app.js. So I say something like this, right? File name, app.js, right? App author. We're going to talk about this in a second, at author, and we're going to put in my name. I like to put in the date too. I probably didn't ask you to do this, but I like to put in the date. And I used to put in the date, which is today's date, June 1st, 2016, right? You can also put some other things in here. Like, for example, maybe a student ID would be pretty cool, right? So maybe kind of thing, and there is no @ for this, but you could put in something like student ID, your own comments here, and whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, mine would be 3008185557 if that was my student ID, right? Yeah. That's the main application. Forget about CSS. You're not really doing anything with CSS unless you write your own CSS. This is where it would be, right? And then the other thing I'm looking for is of your website name. which is, in your case, the website name is going to be your assignment1 dot whatever it is on Azure. This is your actual Azure link. So when I say my website name, right, would be something like, you know, and I think I made it lesson COMP125 summer 2016. I think that's what I made it. And then I think I made it something like lesson 4.azurewebsites.net. Yeah, right? That's what it should be, your website. Why? Because this will link to your file. I can see what it is. And then under your file description, you know, so here's my file description. I'll put @description, right? So here's my description. And my description would be right here. It would say this, this file is the main JavaScript file for the website. Something like that, right? For now. That's all it does right now. For functions, if I want to kind of define functions, like for example, this send button click event, right? Or this, if I have another function like this, like show form input, hold on. I have a standard that I like to use across all my programming languages. I like to use UEDoc, and I've kind of talked about this with, for people who are doing C# with me. If you go to UEDoc, there is a, if I go to click on syntax reference here, right? Notice that there is a documentation style for what I'm looking for. So for example, because I'm defining a function, there's properties, functions, attributes, and so on, you can actually go through this whole thing, and you can see that there is a documentation for each object that you're creating inside your JavaScript, right? Like for example, we can simply call our functions methods because that's what they are, right? And so that, but you can see that there's examples of how to create stuff for your function. So here's what I would do. I would do something like this. I would say **. It has to be like this. So / **, and then inside there you do your first description. This function, you know, shows the input from each form field on the console. That's what this thing does, right? And then I would do something like this, @method, right? Because that's what this is. And I would call what the function is called, show form input, right? And then @return, right? Notice that it gives me all kinds of hinting here because I've downloaded my type. See how it's doing it all for me. You can download a little cool thing for Visual Studio Code to help you out here. My type is void, right? Because it doesn't return anything right now. And there is no description for that, right? That's what I'm looking for documentation, all right? Every method, every function you create, I want you to document like this.
Not like the other one, like data from
like this? This is just for like a variable. This is just a variable, paragraphs, right? But when you actually define a method, or if you're talking about what it does, like for example, let's say I put this inside of a function, which I'm just writing it all inline like this. But if I was to put it inside of a function, then I would actually have a function call. And here, this is just a for loop that loops through and prints out the stuff. I want you to define what it does. So check to see if paragraph 1 exists, right? And then here you probably put something, if paragraph 1 exists, then show each paragraph, or assign each paragraph, or populate each paragraph on the page, if it exists. Make sense? So that's what I want you for documentation. I don't want you to over comment, but there should be some comments, especially this. I will be looking for this inside your assignment. So please make sure that your student number and basic stuff is in there so I can see that it's you. I want to see some comments like this. By the way, if you don't do UEDoc perfectly, I'm showing you this is just a documentation best practices. I'm not going to kill you for it. If you just use comments, like regular comments, that's okay too, as long as you tell me what it is. But I recommend doing this because later on, it's going to help us out when we do more advanced JavaScript, which will start next week. Okay, so please, what we've done so far, this is week 4. Guys, we're still scratching the surface of what JavaScript can do. It can do a lot. All we're doing is getting you used to the environment. Okay. I'm going to put this up on GitHub. Any other questions before we depart for the day? Yes. Mostly for JavaScript, but yeah, you wouldn't use it for your HTML. Was no need for that. Okay, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to say updated app.js to work with multiple sites, pages. That I've really done, and push. So now you have, guys and girls, you have all my changes up online. So that, again, it gives you the solution. I didn't do the full show function. Like this function is obviously incomplete. You want to put all the names, but I'm sure you can see the pattern. Okay? Any other questions before we depart? And I'll see you for JavaScript. I'll see you guys next week on Monday, right? All right, guys, thanks so much. Take care.